your chapter 4 of your textbook, there was a question, or it gave you a table, and it's table 4-7. And so it showed you a dihybrid cross and showed you all the genotypic ideas that you could get. And then it said, this is the normal. And then it talks about the modified ratios, or the modifications of Mendel's ratios. And so she was like unsure, like, what does that actually mean? So basically what we're looking at in chapter 4, it's looking at specific traits. So sometimes you can have a, what we've looked at recently was, okay, either it's expressed, it's dominant, or it's recessive. That's it. Well, we can have modifications of what is being expressed because you can have genes that are co-dominant, meaning if you have that one dominant allele, it's expressed. If you have the other dominant allele, then something completely different is expressed. Okay? You can have where you have, if somebody is homozygous, right, they express one particular trait. If they're heterozygous, they express a modification. And then if they're homozygous recessive, they express a completely different trait. And so that's where those modifications to Mendel's ratios come into play. Okay? So we have codominance, we have our basic dominant recessive, we have...
Is it different from individual assortment?
So individual assortment is another concept on its own.
Okay.
Individual assortment is saying that when we go through meiosis, we just independently assort, and so when we finish, we have all this variation. Okay? What the modifications is saying is how are those genes being expressed? So how are they interacting? Okay? Did that answer your question, Diane?
So it's just different phenotypes?
Correct.
Oh, okay.
So different phenotypes depending on how those particular genes interact.
Okay, so it's different parent genotypes?
Say it again.
Different genotypes of the parents?
No, not necessarily different genotypes. Different genotypes, depending on the particular trait and how that trait is expressed, will give you different phenotypes. Did that make sense? So
for example, like what's this one? 15, 16, and 116.
Okay, so that's saying depending on what the gene is, what trait we're looking at, it can be expressed differently depending on how the genes interact. So I'm trying to figure out a better way to explain this. So the example they gave you were like pea plants and flowers. And if you were carrying the dominant trait, the flower is red. If the plant's carrying is homozygous recessive, it's white. But if the plant was heterozygous, it gives you a pink color. So it gives you a variation, meaning that when somebody's heterozygous, it gives you an alternate trait. You can have situations like that, and so no longer are you going to have a 9-3 necessarily 1, or it would be a 3-1 phenotype, right? It gives you now a different phenotype because you have the pink. Instead of it just being red or white, you have red, pink, or white.
Also, it's like codominant and other types of...
Right, other types of...
combinations.
Yes, exactly. And so that's where their modifications come into play.
Okay.
Okay? And then the other question you had was about complementation.
Something like that.
So what we're talking about with complementation, it's basically looking at when we look at a particular mutation. Okay, so when you're going through your reading, you should have read, like, they'll talk about wild type and they talk about mutation. Wild type, by definition, is what we normally see within a population. So wild type, even though it says that, it really means it's the normal trait. Okay? And so when there's a mutation, that means the mutation is something that's being expressed that normally is not expressed in a population. So complementation is saying, okay, we're looking at this population, this particular trait is being expressed. We know it's a mutation. Well, we think it's a mutation, but now what they're doing is they're doing studies to try to determine, okay, is this a true mutation, or is this just an allelic combination that's giving us an alternate trait? So that's what complementation is referring to. looking at a mutation and identifying if it's a true mutation or if it's just an allelic combination that's new that's giving us a different trait within a population.
There was also recessivity,
Yes.
and they compared the two. So what was the difference?
Where were you at? Where did you?
Recessivity. Recessive. I can't say it. I can spell it.
Oh, when they were talking, that had to do with heterozygous traits, the complementation analysis, the grouping. Is that what you're referring to?
It was,
Or were you talking about expressivity, which was your other question?
yes, that.
Okay. So expressivity. Now, and it was talking about penetrance. Is that what you're talking about? Penetrance and expressivity. Have you guys gotten that far yet in your reading? Okay, that's chapter 4 material. Okay, so expressivity is basically looking at what is the degree of a particular expression. So if this person has this phenotype or genotype, excuse me, they have a genotype. How much of it's being expressed? So that's called the penetrance.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Expressivity. Okay, I'm gonna say it slow because otherwise I'm gonna say it wrong. Okay. Expressivity. That now is looking at what is the range of expression. So the example of that to me would be like Down syndrome. Okay. So you can have a child that has Down syndrome, and if you line up all these children with Down syndrome, you can have some children that have what they refer to as a severe form of Down syndrome, and so they have the physical appearance, but then they also have all of the other mental and physical aspects of Down syndrome. Then you have another child who also has Down syndrome. They still have an extra chromosome, the same extra chromosome, right? But then you have another child that is declared having Down syndrome, but they may only have the physical appearance, and then they function normally. They don't have any of the other traits that come along with it.
Okay.
And so expressivity refers to whatever the genotype is, how much of it is being expressed. So what is the range? Because there's a range of expression with some traits, with some genotypes. And so that's what expressivity refers to.
Okay.
Okay?
That was just confusing because I think if it's black coat color, it would express black coat color like completely.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess they mean like Down syndrome.
If you have different genotypes, it can give you a variety. It can give you a range. Yes, ma'am.
Could it also be explained like, let's say, you have like, let's say one parent is blonde and one parent is brown, like one kid could have really dark brown hair, one could have really light brown hair, like it's just expressed stronger.
Right, right. And with hair color, it's a little different because with hair color, it has to do with multiple genes. So like skin color, there's actually 4 genes that determine skin color. And so it allows us to have a rainbow of color per se, where you can have those who are really dark and then you can have those that are very fair skin. And you can have 2 individuals come together and one is fair skin and one can be dark skin, and they come together and they get a child that's very fair skin. And then the next child can be very dark skin. And then they may get a child in between because there's multiple genes that determine skin color. And depending on how we arrange those genes will determine what the skin color is going to be. Mm-hmm. So, yes ma'am.
Is that kind of the same with like, people that have like food sensitivities or food allergies or food intolerances? Is it the same idea? Okay.
Right, the same idea. So you can have a certain, so you have some people who are, let's say, like allergic to nuts, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but you can have some individuals that it's just peanuts, and then you have some that it doesn't matter. If it is a nut, they are allergic to.
Okay.
So you have that range of expressivity.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay? Does that make sense to everybody? So if you haven't gotten there yet, when you do get there, hopefully it'll make sense as you're reading, because we've talked about it. And since you've already gotten there, hopefully that clears up some stuff for you. Okay? All right? So when you guys come in on Thursday, I hope that you have gotten through the material so that you can come with your questions. So we can discuss it, we can do some problems, and so that you guys are all prepared for the exam. Okay? Any questions?
Can we
Yes.
go over the quiz?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, for the,
We'll go over the quiz on Thursday.
Okay.
And that way you guys will have it in front of you, you'll see what you missed, and then you can ask questions. Go ahead.
for the exam, the thing that we need to download, is that on?
The Respondus, so that is on Blackboard.
Okay,
Mm-hmm. And the purpose of Respondus lockdown, so make sure you can download it before you even take the exam. Okay, and I suggest that you do that. Don't wait until you're Sunday night and you decide, oh, I'm gonna take the exam, and then you get in there and you haven't downloaded Respondus and it's not cooperating. So I suggest that you do that well before then. And so you can download it onto your computer, and so then when you get ready to open up the exam, you have to open it up through Respondus, and then what it does is it shuts down all your other internet stuff. So you can't, take my exam and then let me minimize this and pull up the internet and type in that question and let me see what the answer is. Okay? Y'all are savvy, I know how. Y'all are. So that locks it down. I don't do the monitor though, because I can do a camera too. Like where there's a camera on you so I can see if you're looking at your book or your phone, or if you get up and somebody else is taking you, but I don't. That's extreme. So I'm not going to do that, but you have to have that lockdown, okay? All right? Okay.